The Profit Constructors presents Construction Junction, the junction between accounting and construction. Please welcome our host, Tonya Schulte.
Welcome back to this next episode of the Construction Junction podcast. My name is Tonya Schulte, your host. I am the founder of the Profit Constructors, where we help you run with the big dogs. I also lead the Construction Junction Roundtable. So if you are an accountant in the construction space and you're interested in joining other accountants for regular conversation around topics that can help your clients, such as the topic that we're talking about today, which isn't necessarily straight up accounting related, although it does have corollaries, come and join us at the Construction Junction Roundtable. We'd love to have all of you construction accountants in there. Today, we are going to be talking about something, again, like I said, it's not necessarily accounting related, but it does correlate in that it's something that the business owners that we work with on a regular basis need to know more about and should be aware of and should be thinking about in terms of their business, how it's operated, how it's growing, and how to protect it. Because what we are talking about today is estate planning and asset protection. So one of the things that I'm very excited about in terms of talking about this is I think so many business owners tend to put this on the back burner and tend to not really want to discuss it for a lot of different reasons. One is it's sort of human nature, right? To not want to think about what would happen, what could happen. That's not very pleasant. So I think we tend to put that on the back burner. We'll think about that later. We'll do something about it later. I think that is a common thing that happens when it comes to estate planning, especially. But even with asset protection, it's something that tends to be backburnered, maybe because it's not necessarily something we don't want to think about, but because it doesn't seem important at the time. What seems more important is, fueling the business, making the business grow. But as the business grows, it becomes more and more important to make sure that it and its assets and in total are being protected. And so that's one of the main reasons why we wanted to have our guests on today to help us understand this and to help us think about it, hopefully in new ways, and understand what the terms are, understand what is that? What is estate planning? What is asset protection? And how do we make sure that all that's being managed and protected well? And at the same time, how do you find the right trusted advisor in this space? So when we come back, we're going to be talking with my friend, who's also my attorney, Paul Deloughery, and he's going to tell us more about that. And then we'll actually talk to one of his other clients as well and get some more feedback on how does this process work when we are looking to tackle these more weighty topics that are so important. How does that process kind of roll? So we're going to talk about that in more depth in just a couple minutes.
Hey, are you an accountant or bookkeeper in deep on the construction industry niche? Or maybe you're just thinking about throwing your hat in the ring. We here at Construction Junction also host a roundtable over at Roundtable Labs, just for construction types like you. This isn't a workshop or seminar. Instead, we dive deep into the issues faced in this niche and the firms that serve them. We tackle topics together by crowdsourcing our experiences and areas of expertise. We also support each other when things get tough. Think of it as a cross between a mastermind and support group for financial types that you didn't know you needed. So if you're looking to build better construction clients as you build a better accounting business, give us a try.
Welcome back. We're excited to be joined by my friend, Paul Deloughery, attorney Paul Deloughery. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, thanks. Good to see you, Tonya. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm actually, as I was mentioning in the first segment, I'm actually really excited to kind of talk about this because, as you know, my husband and I are kind of in this stage of life where we're thinking about these topics of estate planning and asset management and all of those things that we're kind of at that. I mean, you should probably think of it at every stage of life, right? But sure. I think when we get to this sort of middle stage of life, it sort of hits you upside the head, like, oh, what are you doing here? And so, of course, that's something that we've been thinking about a lot recently. And so I'm excited to kind of talk to you about this and also talk about it in terms of what do people not know? I mean, that's something that we say often here at our firm. You don't know what you don't know. And so kind of fill us in, Paul. What is it that most people don't know about estate planning and asset management?
Yeah. So estate planning. So I'm an attorney. I do estate planning and asset protection. It's not really the asset management part, but
Right.
yeah, asset protection. So this last weekend, I spoke at a convention of investors. They invest in multifamily housing units, and I spoke about asset protection, and I went into a lot of details about here. You can have this limited partnership and put individual rental units into separate LLCs, and that's owned by the partnership. And I went into a lot of detail about that, and it got a little bit complicated. And then someone asked, well, where would someone who's just starting, start? Like, do we start with building all that stuff out? And what I said, kind of to your point, is, well, statistically, more people die than get sued. So it's better to protect yourself from and protect your family in case of incapacity, in case you pass away, that kind of thing. So I said, like, everyone with any kind of a business should at a minimum have power of attorney forms and a will, making it clear who's in charge and making it clear who's going to run operations. If your business, if you're in a car accident, you're laid up in the hospital for a month, who's going to be writing the payroll checks and signing contracts and all that kind of stuff. So that's the real basic part, is just getting a good estate plan. And then that's the foundation for all the other stuff.
Yeah. Something that you just mentioned made me think something that you had kind of been instrumental in helping my husband and I understand, Paul, which is, you mentioned at the base, someone should have a will. Is the will always the best way to go in managing your estate, or is there other options? And how should someone look at each of those options?
Well, you always need a will, just in case. And the will is in case there's an asset that would need to be probated if you pass away. And then secondly, if you have minor children, a will can nominate a guardian to take care of those minor children if you're in a coma, for example, or something like that. So a will is necessary. For a business owner, it's really great if you can have a trust. It's really, really good. I've been involved in so many probates involving businesses where the family was fighting over who should be in charge over the course of months. And meanwhile, it's like, a business is like okay. I think a well-done business should be like a mule, like it produces for the business owner, but you have to feed and take care of the mule. Like if that mule is ignored for 2 months, the thing's going to walk away or die or something, but it's not going to be there just like nothing happened 2 months later. The clients are going to go away, the staff's going to leave, they're going to, whatever. So the whole thing, and I've just seen this over and over. So to answer your question, yes, a business should be in a trust, absolutely. And then from there, you can add other things to provide asset protection and whatnot.
That makes a lot of sense. And here's another thing I think people don't often think about. Let's say you have your will. Let's say you've set up a trust. If you just sort of have those documents and they're stuck in a drawer somewhere, but you don't ever tell anyone where they are or how to find them, like, I think it's super important for folks to know, and for especially within your business, for business owners to have communicated to key team members, here's what you guys should do, like you said, in case I'm incapacitated, in case something happens to me, in case I die. We don't want to talk about these things often, but I think it's important within our business to have both within the family, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, but also within the business, key team members on the business need to know what are next steps that they should take in those situations as well.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone needs to know kind of what to do. And I'm thinking, so we're recording this on February 20th, 2023, and recently there was that train derailment in Ohio, and no one in the community knew what to do. Like they I guess they knew about calling 911, but that none of them had ever gone through the possibility that there could be some kind of a disaster like that. So no one knew anything. And for a business, I mean, it certainly is possible to imagine that the business owner could not be there at some point, or frankly, the business owner wants to maybe take a vacation once in a while. And if the business owner is tied up or can't get back, or the flight's delayed or something like that, there has to be a clear way of deciding who's going to make the decision the next day or sign the paychecks. Paychecks are due the next day, and the business owner's in an airport with no Wi-Fi. So correct. There absolutely needs to be some way about that. I probably went too far into detail with that. Sorry about that.
No, I think it's good. I was just sitting here thinking, I know of a particular situation where a friend of mine passed away, and no one knew how to get into her password manager to open any of her, any of her softwares that she was running her business on. Many people surrounding her, even though she did have one employee working in her business, but even that employee wasn't aware who all of her clients were. Like, there was just so much data and information. Several of us in her community, the accounting community, stepped in to try and help and get some of these pieces put together. But it was a very difficult road for all of us to help and try to understand where things were, because there just hadn't been clear communication. And I think because, as I said a few minutes ago, these are things we don't like to talk about, right? I don't like to think about who will raise my children if I'm not here to raise them. I don't even want to think about that possibility, but I have to. It's an important thing to think about. So how do you kind of guide clients, Paul, into getting into some of these more sensitive, harder to think about topics?
It has gotten easier over the years, I will say. Not too long ago, maybe only 10 years ago, there were still older people who I would do their estate plans, and I would suggest to them that they tell the people in their family what the document said, and they would say, no, I'm not going to share anything. I've put things in writing. That's good. Done. Bam. And that was kind of the older way of doing things. I think going back, I think in the 50s and 60s, people were really hush hush about money, all kinds of taboos and whatnot. But I will say, I don't say good things about social media much, but one of the things about maybe social media and whatnot is I think people are a lot more open about talking about things. And so lately, maybe over the last 5-10 years or so, I've noticed a change, that when I talk to people about the advantage of talking to your family about, here's what we've done, and have a family meeting, that people are a lot more open about that. I think people now see the need about that, the need for that.
Yeah, that's good. That's an interesting observation that I wasn't aware of. I often see so many folks that still, I think, again, not even necessarily where it's taboo, but they are maybe almost afraid to go there, right? To almost even think about the fact that I should prepare or plan for something to happen to me makes it feel like I'm causing that thing to happen. And that's definitely not the case. It's just good planning. And any person or business owner especially needs to have good plans in place. Let's kind of talk more about, because we've talked a lot now about estate planning, but we're also talking about asset protection. So what does that really mean? Let's start there. Let's define our terms. What is asset protection?
Great. You started with a great question, defining what asset protection means. So to me, asset protection means to protect your assets. And I think you laugh, but I think I'm probably in the minority of attorneys. I'm probably in the minority of asset protection attorneys when I would define asset protection as protecting assets, because the most popular device now, I'll give you a very common example. The most popular method of asset protection, in air quotes, is using an asset protection trust. And an asset protection trust in most states and in almost all situations will not protect your assets. And I know that sounds weird, because after all, it's called an asset protection trust. But it's the truth. So let me just, without getting too nerdy about this, let me just explain what an asset protection trust is. So you kind of know what I'm talking about. They're marketed a lot, partly and because they sound great. So the idea is, you can put your net worth, transfer your business, your accounts, whatnot, to this trust, and you're not the trustee, but you're the beneficiary. And the trust also says that if you're ever sued, those assets are off limits to any of your creditors, and so it's promises that you're protected, right? The problem is that in most states, that's not recognized, including Arizona, including California. And I think, well, I'll stop there. Okay. I'll just keep to what I know. So those kinds of trusts are recognized in, for example, Nevada, Alaska, South Dakota. But if you own something in one of those states and you happen to get either put into an involuntary bankruptcy, or you want to file bankruptcy for some reason, the asset protection trust, unless it's more than 10 years old, is going to be part of the bankruptcy estate. So you're not protected in bankruptcy, even in a state that supposedly recognizes an asset protection trust. So yeah. So anyway, I forgot what your first question was.
We were defining terms, but
yeah, defining terms. Yeah. So if you put into Google asset protection, you're going to come up with a whole bunch of ads for asset protection trusts. And in a lot of situations, and unless you're the property that you're wanting to protect is in I think one of 23, states right now that recognizes this. And as long as you don't want to, or you're not thrown into a bankruptcy for the next 10 years, you're good. But for people here in Arizona, for example, you can't protect a property or an Arizona business with an asset protection trust, because the Arizona court is going to just apply Arizona law, which says that that's not recognized. So
interesting. So just to clarify, are there even folks who will sell asset protection trusts here in Arizona and not give you that information?
correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So the idea, so we started with defining terms. So in my mind, asset protection should actually protect your assets. Now, the people who sell these techniques will say, well, but it makes it harder. Okay. And the attorney on the other side is going to be less likely to proceed if they find out that your assets are in this asset protection trust. But I will tell you from experience that that's not really the way things work. I mean, the attorney's going to plow ahead, get the judgment against you, and then throw you into a debtor's exam and see what kind of resources you have to pay this debt. And so it doesn't really really in my experience scare away people. And then in terms of another term, so asset protection should also do more than just hide assets, because I think a lot of people, again, if you put in asset protection in Google, you'll come up with, for example, a Wyoming LLC is widely promoted because it provides privacy. Well, if I go into a war zone with a camouflage cloak, that's not gonna, I don't want to be there. I want to be in a tank.
Yeah.
Not in some grass covered clothing or something like that. So the idea of protecting yourself, it's yeah, anyway, I think I've probably explained that enough. It should, I mean, you should have your assets so that they're not easily seen, but also it gives you protection.
That makes a lot of sense. I liked your illustration. Are we just covering them up? Or are we actually physically protecting them, and physically being, and again, in air quotes, right? Like protecting them the best way that we can. So when you're counseling and working with someone, because again, basically what you and I do is consulting, right? At the end of the day, we're giving advice, our best advice. And so when you were walking someone through that, what are your, how do you advise them when it comes to asset protection?
Well, so there's no one size fits all. Good question. There's no one size fits all solution for people. There are some patterns that have worked, that are proven to work. And so again, what you do is you start with the foundation of a good estate plan. And then from there, you figure out what the risky assets are, like a business could get sued for, doing, bad work or, faulty work or something like that. The business owner could get personally sued for something, if it's management or sexual harassment or, whatever it is, or just getting in a car accident. So we have to look at both things. We need to protect the business owner from business liabilities, and then we need to protect the business from the owner's liabilities. And I think most of the people watching this are business owners, right? So that's what so we want to protect both. And then, thinking about, well, if they have teenage kids, running around with, cars and, maybe not driving safely and making irresponsible decisions. So you need to protect the owner and the family from that kind of thing also.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I liked what you said, and it was a very attorney statement of you, right? There's no one size fits all. It depends, right? I love that answer from my attorney friends. It depends is a good answer from an attorney. I think that's great. If someone were looking and saying, okay, I've reached this point at which I do have a business, or, as you're talking about, maybe they have some real estate that they want to protect. And they're reaching that sort of stage of like, wait, I have all of these things. I don't even know if they're protected. What would be the very first step that they should take? Like you said, the foundation is the estate planning. But then what would they do next to kind of find out what that roadmap would look like for them?
Yeah. So the first step is just talking to a asset protection attorney. I mean, call me or any asset protection attorney should be able to give them an idea of where they are. And what the possible exposures are, and then kind of map out the things in order of priority. And frankly, one of the things is just making sure that there's good liability insurance, because insurance is always the first line of defense. And then the foundation of the estate plan, and then figuring out what the more likely liabilities would be, and going from there. I hope that answered the question.
It did. It makes a lot of
it's
sense.
hard for me to talk about in theory. So
I get that. Yeah. and that's part of it too. And that's why I said it's very loyally of you, but it's very true that everything is so situational. And so it's much, much harder to come in and say, this is exactly how you protect assets. And I think that's one reason why, when you were saying earlier, these asset protection trusts seemed like such a great idea, right? Like, it seems like this is a one size fits all. This is going to take care of everything that I need it to take care of, one and done. And it's not really that simple in any case.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So a really key thing would be to go with an attorney who goes with tried and true traditional methods. So this thing about for example, the asset protection trust, as far as I know, there's only one case that says around the country, there's one case I think it was in Nevada, that says that it works. But there's historically been, all the other cases say that they don't work. But what we do is much more traditional, just a It's an irrevocable trust with a couple of little components to it that make it easy to unwind, and easier to make changes and whatnot. And the real key for people is you want to have okay, so rule number one with asset protection, you want to control things but not own it, because what you own can be taken from you. So, and I think John D. Rockefeller said, control everything, own nothing. Or he's supposedly, I don't know, but supposedly he said something like that. But yeah, that's the basic approach. And then you want to have flexibility and control. You want to have checks and balances, because if you're transferring ownership of your money to someone else as trustee of this trust, you want to make sure that you're not going to get screwed later. You use tried and true methods, so you're not like having to cross your fingers and hope that something works. You want something that's actually worked in the past. So that's what we do. And so the basic building blocks are some form of a limited partnership, because those are just, there's multiple reasons that those work. I won't go into them right now. We can,
Sure.
It gets a little nerdy, but basically, yeah, they're very protected. So you end up putting safe assets into that. Safe meaning like an account. An LLC is actually considered a safe asset. So you can have the ownership of the LLC in this limited partnership. And then risky assets like a business, like a rental property, a boat, something like that, can go into separate LLCs, and those are then owned by the partnership. And then the partnership, the limited partnership, is owned by usually two or more different trusts, and the client, your business owner, or the business owner's trust would be the general partner of the partnership. I'm just about done here. So your business owner client is the general partner of the partnership. So they're in control. Being general partner of being general partner of a limited partnership means that they're in control of the whole thing. Okay, so they have the steering wheel, but the ownership is largely in this irrevocable trust that they don't own, so it can't be taken from them. But then there are some other methods, other clauses that we put into the trust so that they can at some point unwind it, or make changes, or change the trustee, or take money out as a loan, different other things like that. So they still have the beneficial use of it, but they don't own it, so it can't be taken from them.
Makes a lot of sense. I loved that you nerded out on that, because it really did help, and everything made a lot of sense. Paul, let's take a quick break, because I'd like
Sure.
to actually bring in one of your clients that you've helped do this for, and kind of discover how you guys were able to walk through that together. So we'll take just one quick break.
If you would like to share your company or product on the Construction Junction, email hello@theprofitconstructors.com to become a sponsor.
All right, welcome back. We're joined now by George Athan, who's a private investor who's been working with Paul on all of these topics we've been talking about, right? George, you've been working with both estate planning and that asset protection. George, you told me when we were kind of chatting a little bit ahead of the podcast, you were looking for both and viewing them as sort of separate types of services, but they really are so interconnected, right? So how did you come to really understand that by working with Paul, that these things are really kind of tightly bound?
Well, the first part, had some family that was having health issues, and I saw family members not talking, and all the difficult times and things that happened from the stress. And then when I saw, some people didn't have some of the estate, not from a financial perspective, just health decisions and all these things, it made me say, hey, I should look into that. And everyone thinks, hey, I'll do that down the road. And there's plenty of people that I'm sure regretted not having that, because no one knows, not no one, but many times you don't know when some of these health problems happen. So because of these situations, I started thinking about estate planning. At the same time, I go into distressed businesses, so I see a lot of things. So it could be deals that I'm part of, it could be deals that I'm considering, but even going back for the last 13 years, even from a consulting standpoint, I've seen a lot of businesses, kind of the two scenarios that you guys had mentioned earlier. Either something's going on in the owner's personal life that's affecting the business. They could be going through a divorce, all these different things, and then it's affecting the business. Or something happening in the business where the executives are actually being sued and a party to the lawsuit, not just protecting the corporate veil. So I started looking into asset protection so that I could see, hey, whether, even if it's not a company that I'm involved in, maybe to help some of these people in some of these messy situations, I just want to learn more about it. And then, I spoke to a number of different asset protection attorneys. It's funny, somebody should just kind of go down that path and just talk to a bunch of people and hear and kind of hear the spiel. It's pretty entertaining, but I felt really good with Paul because, Paul lives in both worlds. And while I was talking with him as far as estate planning, he said, well, what are you doing? And then we went on to the asset protection conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. So in that journey where you went from, here's some things I'm seeing, and I see that this is a piece of this, one of the things that you said in there that I'd kind of like to dive into, because it's actually something that we talk with our clients about all the time as well, is like piercing the corporate veil, right? So like, I think there are so many business owners, especially business owners who fall in that S Corp range, where they've just sort of come up, they've been sole proprietors for so long. Now they're in this S Corp world. I think that don't understand what that even means. So Paul, I'm going to ask you this question, like, what does piercing the corporate veil mean, and how important is it to protect that?
So what does it mean? Piercing the corporate veil. So you set up this LLC, you're running your business through an LLC, and you think you're good. You're protected. If one of your employees gets in a car accident or something like that happens, you're fine. That's the idea of it, and especially because you have this Wyoming LLC, and you paid more money for it, and you think, well, the advertisements say, well, you're totally protected. Well, one of the things that a court will do is they'll look at the totality of the circumstances. So it's not to the court. If this comes up in a lawsuit, it's not like they're looking, oh, do you have an LLC? Okay, check, you're protected. No, they're looking at the totality of the situation and seeing, well, okay, so here's this business. How's it run? How's the money flowing back and forth? Are the signs on the truck, does it say, Bob's Builders, or does it say Bob's Builders, LLC? Are you actually treating the company like it's an LLC, or is it just, just something that you're kind of keeping hidden from people? Your checks, do they, the how you pay people and whatnot, is that going, is that coming from the business? When people pay you, is that going to the business, or is it going to your personal bank account? Do you pay for groceries with your business account? And like all of that stuff, if it comes before the court there, and I've seen this happen, it can become an issue, and the court could basically just hold you, the business owner, personally responsible for whatever the damages are, despite your claim that you have an LLC. So yeah. So so piercing the corporate veil is definitely one of the top 3 ways that people who think they're protected, get shocked, and discover later that they're not.
We, just to share from my own personal experience, we had a client who was in a partnership. So it was 2 couples, all 4 people in a partnership. And one of the couples continuously was, as you mentioned, so it's made me think of this, Paul, buying personal groceries using a company card. And so my contact within the company came to me and asked what I thought about that. And I said, it's a bad practice, needs to stop immediately. And she went back to the other owners and said, we want to stop doing this. And they said, oh no, that's one of the perks and air quotes of being a a business owner, so we get to do that. And no matter what advice I gave, the other couple refused to listen. And so my main contact in business was, obviously very rightfully so concerned that her business was being put, in jeopardy, that this business she had the partnership and was being put in jeopardy by their actions. And so, they took some steps to mitigate that. But it's just, I think a lot of people have certain ideas about what are their rights or perks as a business owner that aren't necessarily always true. George, I'd like to see, because you've gone into lots of distressed businesses. What are some of the things that you've seen in that regard where people don't understand how this can all come crashing down?
Yeah, commingling funds is one of the, like, if you go to buy a business and you look at the financials, one thing is really common is people treat their business bank account like a personal bank account. And it becomes hard to distinguish what is what, especially the smaller the business, the more those two things kind of blend into each other. But also there are other things like, single member LLCs in New York. There's really no protection there from like a debt perspective, or, but people don't know these things because you just read what's on the front of the label. You're not looking at what's in back of the label, it's just easier to kind of get the marketing headline. So I've seen a number of things. I've seen businesses where the employee was given a car, was supposed to use only to and from work on the weekend, goes out, crashes the car, hurts a bunch of people. And even if at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's found that you're not liable, you're still going through a lot of drama to get to that point, So there's just so much. One of the great things, Paul helped me look at things differently from this perspective. So one thing is that we had a situation in this one business. After I came into the business, after doing the due diligence, it looked like some of the skeletons in the closet were put to bed. After deals finalized in the business, one of the things that we did, first of all, was we started separating some of the assets. So because it wasn't a full acquisition, I was purchasing 50% of the company. It was the company still existed. It wasn't like an asset sale where I was just able to kind of separate those two. So we had to restructure some things. So where we had, the employees are anything that faces customers or employees or people, because people tend to be the problem somewhere, right? That's in this company, which leases to another company that has the assets. Because of just thinking things from this perspective that I honestly wasn't even thinking about before, one of those companies, they signed a contract with like a contractor, but from 3 years earlier, where the contract was ridiculous. I don't know why the business owner actually signed this thing, but basically it gave them for the next 5 years residuals on a commission on sales that they should have only gotten the current sales, never mind, what happened. And it was there. It was, this person was dead to rights. It was a $300,000 liability. The business was already distressed. If it lost $300,000, it couldn't even, it wasn't going to be able to afford even the court to fight, the attorney fees to fight it. So what we wind up doing, because when we came in, we already had restructured this, and this thing had come in after the fact. Negotiating was really easy because we said, hey, listen, this entity we're putting this to bed. We were able to settle for pennies on the dollar. But I think a lot of times, just like insurance or just like anything else, a lot of these people don't think about this until it's too late. And then by the time they think about it and they start doing something about it, I don't think that protection is there, but I'm sure, Paul could speak to that.
No,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And I would say, we've run into that again on our side of things as well. Like, a lot of the things that can come around to hurt businesses. Of course, we work with a lot of construction companies. We work exclusively with construction companies with a few rare exceptions. But, just little things that business owners either don't know or they think doesn't necessarily matter to them so much. If it's never gone wrong before, why would I make a change? So something as small as like here in Arizona, when they go to work on a new job site, they have 20 days to file a preliminary notice of intent, of the, not intent to lien, but of the fact that they have the right to lien the property if they need to. But if they don't file that 20-day notice, they can get into some really sticky waters. And we've had clients that came to us, like you were talking about, George, in distress situations, because oh, well, we've worked with this person for a long time, so we won't file that notice because maybe they won't like the look of it, or maybe they will think we're trying to do something. It's like, no, it's what's included in the law for your protection and what you're supposed to do. It's not that the business that you're dealing with is going to look down on you for doing it. They're going to understand everybody does it. It's what you're supposed to do. It's how these things work. So yeah, I think it's those types of things that either the business owner doesn't understand or just thinks that it doesn't pertain to them that come back around to bite them in the end. And it's the sad part is when you're walking through that with the business owner, or when you're coming in like you have, George, the sad part is it's that by that time, a lot of times it's too late to remedy.
Yeah, a lot of things are, but I think it's, there's a couple of things going on. So it's the mindset of the business owner where, even in sales and marketing, there's a thing that says people don't buy the prevention, they buy the cure. And it's because they wait till it's too late. They don't buy the health program, they buy the pharmaceutical medicine to fix it, and they want a quick fix, right? But again, like you said, oftentimes it's too late. So I think as a society, human nature, that's what we tend to do. But then also on the other side of it, and I could tell you from just the person, shopping for these kind of services, what you see on social media is really misleading. And everyone, listen, part of marketing today, everyone has to be an expert, and I get it. The problem is it becomes dangerous when you're like ignorant and opinionated at the same time. So now everyone's just repeating things, and even people that aren't the experts, and they're just somebody else that's sharing with their audience what they've heard. But when you're sharing a message that's wrong, it's bad. But let me tell you quickly my experience with dealing with some of the experts. I spoke to a number of different asset protection attorneys, and there were one of two roads it only went down. Road one was everything has to go offshore. Domestic asset protection trusts don't work, they're ineffective. And then you speak to anyone else, you don't need to go offshore, they're overpriced, expensive, they could still force you to bring the assets back to shore, and this is all you need. Now, 100% of the time, regardless of whichever path that they went down in the fork in the road, most of them had no questions as far as what am I doing? What am I trying to do? It was a very generic, most of their free consultation, obviously I get it. It's the opportunity to be the sales pitch, but it was only focused on their plan. It's cookie cutter, works every time. This is the only way to do it. And then when I would ask questions, because I don't know, so I'm asking questions, I heard from this person this, what was strange was they were 100% certain that there was no other way to do it. And everything so usually that's not true. Number one, that's usually not true. Number two, I think I didn't feel comfortable because for two reasons. One, what if my situation is different? So again, I'm not the expert. Maybe you could put cookie cutter system, but just like Paul said, it depends, right? So when Paul and I were working together, he asked questions as far as what do the investments look like now? What are they going to look like in the future? What partners do you have? Like all these things would mean something. And I just felt like, I know from business owners, when I come into a business and the state of the business is in direct proportion to the state of the business owner, how they think, how they act, what they do, right? So every distressed business comes from a business owner that at some point is very closed-minded, just only does what they thought, and then they find out when it's too late that what they were doing wasn't working. So to me, I was thinking, hey, if there are other ways to do things, I'm sure there are many roads lead to Rome. I think I was uncomfortable with hearing people not even entertaining the idea of there being any other way. So anyway, when in dealing with Paul, we spent a lot of time, he spent a lot of time asking me questions. And it felt the trust that we put together is directly correlated to the investment plan and how we operate, the types of businesses that I'm involved in, all these things. So to me, it was a completely different experience.
I think, George, as I was listening to you say all of that, I really was thinking you're highlighting two really important aspects of what the Profit Constructors considers an ideal client. And that is someone who is willing to invest in advice from trusted advisors. And I do mean that it's an investment. Like, we're going to be spending time with you and understanding things. So they need to be willing to invest in that. And they also need to be open-minded to trying new things, whether that's a new workflow, whether that's a new system in the back office, whether that's a new piece of software. That open-mindedness and open-handedness when a new client is approaching us is one of the first things that we look for in determining what's going to be an ideal client for our team. Because as you're talking about, we don't do anything that's cookie cutter. We do a very long prepaid discovery process where we want to find out, how does your business operate? What are you doing now that's working? What are you doing that's not working? Where you want to be in 5 years? So how should we maybe build out some of these accounting systems to get you to that goal in 3 or 5 years, right? So there's all kinds of things that I think it's very important. And it's an interesting thing that what you're kind of highlighting is that what we're kind of looking for in our ideal client is that type of business owner that is probably going to be able to grow their business, because they're not going to just be consistently closed-minded and only going in one direction, which is just never good for any business.
It's never good.
One of the reasons I kind of moved into investing and away from consulting was, I remember having one conversation with a VP of marketing in one of these companies. There was a client, and I just said, if the owner wasn't here, if you and I own this company, this business would be in a different place, so much faster. And what tends to happen, at least on the consulting side, is, you go through this whole process and you say, okay, here's a recipe that's going to fix this business. And then they say, well, I love that. I don't like that. Give me the eggs, but I don't want the flour. Now we're not baking muffins. You just made scrambled eggs. It's a different thing, so like you can't kind of pick and choose. So when, but I think all business, it revolves around people. Problems also tend to come, with people. So I think part of the process is start thinking about things that are going to affect you in the future. And anyone that is involved in business, if they're limited in their own experience, if they're limited to the problems that they've seen, they may not understand the problems that exist. So you speak to attorneys, just in general, as a general statement, they're more precautious. So there's always a joke that sales wants to do everything and legal kills everything, right? Yeah. And the difference is because legal has been around and they've seen every problem under the sun. So the more experience you have in business, the more you see problems exist. So over the last 13 years, I got a chance to see so many different problems in business. And what ends up happening is sometimes business owners are limited to their experience. And if they think that they haven't seen anything or heard any of their friends come into a problem, they think that problems don't happen, and they do.
Yeah, they do. And they can be devastating if you haven't properly planned for them. Paul, I'd like for you to kind of have the final word here. Like, if someone's looking to make a proper plan like that, what would you say? And you've kind of shared this a little bit, but like, how can they, I'm trying to think how I want to ask this question really well. George has kind of outlined that he went through a whole vetting process for finding that right person. How can someone vet and make sure that they're really working with someone who has seen all of that and isn't just trying to sell them something cookie cutter?
Boy, that's hard, because I'm usually one of the people that, how do I say this? I'm trying to put this into an actual sentence. So it's very common for people to do research like what George was doing and talk to a bunch of attorneys. And it's usually like me giving real information versus a couple of salespeople. And I'm not super salesy. I just I say what I know, and I want to, delve into it. And I happen to know in the real world that there are no 100% guarantees about things. And so, anyway, if someone wants a 100% guarantee, they can go with one of the other companies, but just realize that it's not real. And Well, I should take that back. So the guarantee part, I mean, what they should do is go with something that's tried and true. And if you're talking to an asset protection attorney, you should find out what their definition of asset protection is. Okay, does it mean that, I'm actually going to be protected, and it's not just you're not just selling me something that you're hoping will scare away people at some point in the future? And then, like, how tried and true is it? Like, so has this been tested in the courts? And, like it's been held up over and over and over, or are you stuck, trying to maybe find one case that supports this thing that you're trying to sell me?
Yeah, I think part of what you're highlighting is what George and I were just talking about, right? Like when you go to find any sort of outside consultant, maybe one of the first questions you should ask is, what's been your experience, right? And just kind of draw out, like, how long have you been doing this? What have you seen? What do you know? Because I think, again, those of us who are coming in and offering our best advice, it's based on years of experience, years of seeing, oh, if you don't file that preliminary notice, this is what happens. Oh, you know what, Paul, one of the things you taught me, we had an LLC with a DBA, and you helped us to kind of figure out and navigate that. Like, was the DBA the best way to go? And so just like asking your trusted advisors for real advice and finding out, what do they know and what have they seen, I think is one of the best ways to go about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And you almost got me off on a tangent with the LLC with the DBA. That's almost like having an LLC and then saying, well, we don't really care if we're protected or not.
And what's interesting is I have lots of friends in the accounting space that will come to me and they say, well, we're operating, we started our business with doing the same thing we did. We started our business with this name. We decided to rebrand. It was easier just to do the DBA. And when I say to them, oh, well, my attorney informed me that's not really the best way to go, and here's why, they're like, I never thought of that, right? So again, it's like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so reach out, find good trusted advisors, invest in the time that they're taking to spend time with you, and listen to what they have to say, because they're speaking from experience.
Well, and one last word is, if you're going after asset protection, has your planning work actually survived in the courtroom? Like, have you actually been through lawsuits? Have you personally, seen what happens when after a judgment and the person is in a debtor's exam, and all of everything about yourself is exposed, your social security numbers, all of your bank accounts, any trusts or any companies that you have any interest in, and if you refuse to disclose that stuff, then you can be held in contempt of court and fined, even jailed, all this kind of stuff. So has the person actually been through the tough times? That's what you need to find out.
Yep. I love it. Thank you so much, Paul and George, for joining us. I think this has been a fantastic discussion, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for tuning in to Construction Junction. To find out more about the junction between accounting and construction, please email hello@theprofitconstructors.com.